everyone. My name is Meghna from Recorem, and I welcome all of you to Recorem Talks. And in association with State Engineering College, we are doing this. And we have Vijay sir today with us, who will be enlightening us with his rich experience of good 30 years. And he's the managing director of In Touch Construction and Infrastructure Private Limited. And he has basically he's very passionate, and he's done multitasking. He has done law. He's an engineer. So, sir, I would like to know from you that how was your journey, and tell us something about yourself.
Uh, as you already briefed, first, good evening to everybody. As Meghna just briefed, I am basically an engineer. Accidentally, I fell into this industry. My core is electrical engineering. Having done electrical engineering, I worked with a company called Lucas TVS, the TVS group of company, for about 6 years. So from there, there was a sudden shift. I got drawn towards construction. I was pulled by one of my friends. So from there, I started my career. I worked for a company initially. So it's one of the conglomerates in South India. It's a big construction company by name Jain Housing and Constructions Limited. I started my career there, and from there joined as a consultant basically initially, and then my project management skills. I was involved in project management in my earlier company, Lucas TVS. So from Lucas TVS, I shifted on to a construction company, basically depending on my project management skills. So from there, as a consultant, I became their general manager, vice president, and then CEO. I was with them till 2009. I left Jain Housing in 2009 and started my own company in the year 2010. So for past 10, 11 years, I'm on my own with my own construction company. Overall, right from the beginning, we would have done close to about 7 million square feet of construction, predominantly into residential segment. We were not much into commercial segments. We were predominantly into residential, both small buildings, multi-story buildings, and kind of stuff. So that's a general brief about me. And as you said, law was my interest. I wanted to know what law holds on for this industry. So that's how I jumped into law, and as well a lawyer.
But both of the fields are like very different. Like one is in entirely something, and one is entirely intellectual and about psychology. Law is more of psychology, I believe.
Law, see, basically, this I can't say both are completely different. In our field, law is very important because
Yes.
right from how do you acquire your properties, you need to understand the intricacies in buying a property. A small error when you acquire your property, you're doomed. I mean, the entire money goes into the land initially. So it's very important that we know the intricacies that involves when you buy the land. So that way, see, you go on to you depend some other lawyer, and a small error somebody else makes. You make your own mistake; it's not a big deal. But somebody makes a mistake on your behalf, it's going to cost you dear. So that's one of the reasons I got into law. This industry needs law at every stage. How do you deal with your agreements when you do your agreements with your customers? What are the classes that you have in terms of statutory obligations? What are these statutory compliances you need to make? How does law take care of that? So law is intertwined. I won't say law is separate and this is separate. But my core is construction. Law is a passion.
Yeah, law actually crosses every industry's path somewhere or the other, because everywhere you will find some kind of the agreement and some kind of compliance things. So
Yes,
I will law is something which you cannot miss. So, sir, today we have with us civil engineering students
yeah,
from
sure.
State Institute of Engineering College. So, I would like to know that what is it basically that you have your expertise in? What is it that you do, and you can call that, yes, this is my forte?
See, our forte is basically construction. We are a construction company as such. So when you talk about construction, I would always say it is again a project management. Every individual building that you do is a project on its own. So overall, I would say it's project management. How do you manage your project? What all are required when you have to manage your project? The key aspects are you will have to manage the people, you will have to manage the money, and you will have to manage the schedule. These are the quality, of course. These are the four things I would say any project management guy would be looking into. So obviously, finally, it has to give you some profits. If you don't get any profit, then there's no point doing a project. So the bottom line has to be always safe. There's no point in doing a project for the sake of doing a project without any profits. So I would say project management is going to be the key. How do you manage a project? How do you go forward? These are cost control, obviously. How do you estimate your projects? How do you have a figure in mind before you start a project? Where do you stand in between interim? You need to cross check all those aspects when you do a project. So these are very important when you get into a civil, particularly a civil project, because these are all high cost involved projects. Any civil construction, even if you want to build a single house, it's going to cost you 40, 50 lakhs. It's not a small money. That's a lifetime investment for an individual who is going to buy an apartment or is going to build an apartment for himself, an apartment or a house for himself. So it's in fact something very, very important which has to be taken seriously.
Yeah, and that amount is hard earned money, and it is for a lifetime. The
Absolutely.
person is investing. For a common man, for a very common man in India, I think buying a house is the biggest dream.
Absolutely. And
And
study will help in doing that.
right, right, right. So, sir, if I talk about the construction industry, how was it in 2010?
Okay.
Like,
Uh,
it has taken a must have taken a shift, because everything has gone to automation, and so many tools are there, so many things are there, machines must have changed. So what is it that it was, how it was in, because you must have been knowing it so properly, because you have been working into this industry since good 1991, so you must have noticed the shift.
Absolutely. Let's take it from 2000 and starting it from 2010. Because 97, 98 was the biggest crash in terms of real estate industry. So the markets were down and say post 2000, 2001 onwards, the market was picking up. It was really a good market, say till 2004, 2005. Or in fact, even till 2006 and 7, the markets were pretty good. It was a booming market. Real estate was booming. But always this real estate is a cycle. There'll be a boom and there'll be a bust. So that's how this industry has always been. But the period will not be longer. Generally, the boom period would be for 3, 4 years, and then there would be a bust coming of 1 or 2 years, and then again the boom, the bust. So that's how the cycle used to happen. 2001 to 7 was a steady increase in terms of, you could have noticed people who are 20, 25 years, 2001, maybe they would have been kids. So people who are at least 30, 40 years, they would have noticed that from 2001 till 2007, the market was pretty good. But 2007 onwards, there was a slump. That's because of the Lehman Brothers crash that happened and all those economical impacts that the industry was going through. 2007 till 9, again, there was a crash. A crash in the sense market got corrected, but down south, impact was not that much compared to north and other places. South is always a direct invest. It's not an investor market, but it's an end use market. Most of, particularly Tamil Nadu, where we operate, is most end use market compared to other markets like the Bangalore market or the Bombay or the Gurgaon market, where it's more of investor driven markets. So I would limit myself talking about Tamil Nadu because that's where I have done most of my projects. So I will not talk about the other states. Here, 2000. 8, 9 was a slump. 2010 was a good market. Industry was started again regaining confidence, and 2010 till 2013, 14, the market was again pretty good. There was a lot of, in terms of, we found difficult bringing laborers from other places to work because this is a labor intense market. You need huge laborers if you have to maintain your deadlines and other things. You need to plan well ahead. So bring laborers, we have to, in case if we don't get laborers in Tamil Nadu, we'll have to move to other states to bring in laborers. It was a huge work. It was a lot of work happening, a lot of expansions going on, kind of thing. So market was pretty good 2010 to 2014, 15. The market was really good.
Okay, so till 2010, I believe that construction industry is one of those industries wherein it is very far sighted.
Absolutely.
Anything, uh, regardless of other industries, because they believe in the present, or most because everything depends on the technology. But I think the construction industry is directly thinks about, like, okay, 10 years down the line, 20 years down the line, what will happen if something is coming up, any project is coming up, it will come up in next 2 years, 3 years, and people start investing also, because they are so, it is so much planned and so much organized. So
Yes,
again,
yeah, please.
so this industry has been the most far-sighted, and with that, uh, you can easily track that is it going how we planned or is it not going.
No, there is the challenge. See, since this industry, as you say, is far-sighted, acquisition is far-sighted. You acquire your lands now to do projects a couple of years later. That would be far-sighted. But once you finish your acquisition, then how fast you bring that project to life, how fast you bring it onto the market, that's the challenge. Otherwise, the interest cost is going to kill you. Because the land investment, generally, if it is an outright purchase, it's going to be uh, high investment. And so the interest cost will again be a burden to you at the time when you sell your project. So the key is how fast you bring your project after acquisition into the market for sales. And the minute you bring the product into the market, and then how fast you finish your construction. That's the key. It's easy to acquire a project. Everybody can acquire a project if they have money, but it is not the same in terms of construction and completion of the project. You might have loads of money, but you will not be able to complete your project on time if you don't have the required expertise to do your job. So that's very, very important thing. You need to know what you're doing. You have to have a sound technical team to support you, as well as your scheduling and your monitoring and cost control. These are very, very important in doing that.
So
Yes,
we've seen that you've told us that how it was expected in 2010, and how the market crashed in 1997, and then it again, it recovered, and then again it crashed. So how, what was happening in 2015,
uh,
how it was expected and how it turned out.
2015 was 2014 onwards was a new government that has come at the center. And there was a lot of expectations and hope that the markets would do good. Uh, 14 and 15 and all markets were good. I would not say the markets were not good. But 17, 18, I would say there was again 18 onwards, 18, 19. And after that, the pandemic has cost us dear. So,
I
uh,
remember in 2016 this demonetization thing happened, so it hit the construction industry very badly.
That's not the case everywhere. Demonetization definitely brought slowed down the market, but not because of the reasons what most of the people think. Because see, because gone are those days when people used to buy apartments. Pay black money and buy apartments. These are not the days where I would say 80 to 90% of the builders have fallen in line, and there's no question of any black money in all these days. A lot of banks are there to support because the end users are all people who work in some industry or factory or service sector. So it's only through loans that they buy their apartments these days. I'm particularly talking about my organization and my industry. I will not generalize it. So it is mostly demonetization had a negligible effect on buying power or buying capacity, is what I would like to say. But generally, in terms of cash flow constraints during the demonetization period of 3-4 months, yeah, there were huge cash constraints because cash was not able to move freely during that part of the period, 3-4 months, in fact. That had a cascading effect. Small MSMEs and other industries, they mostly operate on cash. And that doesn't mean that the cash is not a proper cash. They operate with a legitimate cash. So that industry got hit, and it's again a cycle. So when small industries get hit, there are suppliers basically. So when that industry gets hit, then your material supplies and your lead times for materials, those things get affected. So that way there was small impact in terms of, but we were able to manage. We were able to plan it well in advance so that. Wherever material was required, we paid advance to the suppliers who were struggling, and we were able to manage that part of the period.
So I think 2015 were quite that of a period, as I remember.
Absolutely.
Where okay, so then moving forward to 2020, where the pandemic happened, great pandemic happened, and all the industries suffered due to it. It
Yes.
regardless of anything, every industry in got a hit. So
Yes.
how the construction industry survived, and what happened, and how things made a shift in the pandemic.
Uh, this question, I think, is the core for today's meeting. So, should we go on with the small presentation which I have right now,
Yes,
or
sir.
we can go ahead with that? Okay, then
So we
I'll
can.
take. Yeah. If
Yes.
can you go to the presentation mode? I'm not able to see anything. Can you? Yeah. Can I start?
Yes, sir. This absolutely answers my question.
Okay. See, this is a very small presentation, maybe 15 minutes or 20 minutes I'll take. I would not bore the students who would have just finished their lunch. They regularly go through with their online sessions. So this would not be a boring session. I would try to keep it to the point and I would not drag it much. We'll jump into the subject. Can we go to the next slide, please? I would like to discuss the construction industry post the pandemic into 4 stages. What was the impact of the pandemic onto the construction industry? What was the effects of that impact on our construction industry? How did the industry sustain itself? What was the sustenance? What was the reason? How some were able to sustain, some were not able to sustain? What were the lessons that we learned from this pandemic? This is completely related to construction industry, is what I have basically prepared, but you can extrapolate it to the other industries also, because this will somehow match with the other industries to some extent. Let's just see what were the impacts on the construction industry because of this pandemic. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. I would say the impact on the construction industries, I would classify it, the impact on the 5 M's. What are the 5 M's? That is the man, the material, the machineries, the money, and the mind. These five were impacted the most uh, because of the pandemic. Let's see what impact did each one of it have. Let's first see what was the impact on the man. See, when we say the man, most of us thought that the pandemic hit only at the labor levels, the people who were the lowest in the pyramid, who were the people who were earning their daily livelihoods. No, that was not the case. The impact was on everybody. It included right from the business owner or the employer, the contractors who were employed by the business owner to carry out the projects. It hit everybody. The pandemic didn't leave anybody alone. It hit everybody, including the vendors who supplied the materials. The laborers, of course, were the most hit according to media, but there were others also who were equally hit. And then the employees, the people who were employed by the employer, we employ our staff in the office to carry out the projects. So these people also got their hit. Let's see, how do you say the business owner got hit because of this pandemic? Suddenly, there was a lockdown announced by a prime minister in 2020, and it was there for almost 3 months in a row. So, how did the business owner or an employer get hit because of this pandemic? The business owner or the employer, irrespective of whether he was earning or not during this period, he had to take care of his employees. First thing, the salaries was fixed. You cannot do anything about the salary because everywhere your employee has to pay his rent. Your employees have to pay their house rents. They're allowed to take care of their family. Everything depended on the salaries what they get. So the employers basically had no other choice but to pay salaries to their employees. Just because 3 months there was a lockdown, we had to pay our rents. Most of the offices are on rent. So the landowners, they have their own share of difficulties. So there was no question of skipping off the rent. So there are a lot of overheads and other things which the business owners or the employers had to take care of. So it is not easy because cash flows are very, very important. And if you don't have any inflows and there are only outflows, that impacts you, you will be able to sustain 1 month. But for the second and the third month, it's going to be difficult. And after that, also, you don't know when your money will start coming in. So that was the situation, the impact that the business owners had. The contractors, again, if you take it, is a similar story. The contractors are the people, they bring in laborers from different parts of the country. So some bring contractors from West Bengal, some from Orissa, some from Assam, some locally Kerala, Tamil Nadu, everywhere. The laborers come from different parts of the country. So the contractors are the guys who will have to take care of the food and shelter of the laborers. So if there is no work, the employer has to take care of the contractor. So if the employer fails to take care of the contractor, the employer does not have means to take care of the contractor, then the contractor is at difficulty. He will not be able to take care of his labors. So this was a very complex situation last year, 2020, say from April onwards, April, May, June. We had a very difficult time managing cash flows, taking care of laborers, the contractors, vendors again. So if material vendors are not taken care of, then they get stuck. So overall, the impact when I say about man, the extent differed from one person to the other, but everybody involved in the construction industry had to go through some difficulty. So some might have gone through little difficulty. If they are employees, maybe their employer had taken care of them. But there are a lot of employees whom the employers could not take care of. So they had a very difficult time. There are a lot of job losses and things like that which happened. So overall, the impact on demand was very heavy because of this pandemic. Let's get into the next slide to see what was the impact on the material. See, the impact on the material was majorly on the shelf life of materials. See, some materials like the cement and other things, when there was no work, it's already procured and kept in your gudowns, and there's a sudden lockdown from tomorrow morning, you will not be able to work. So, what happens to all the stock that you have in your stores? The cements, particularly, it's going to go waste. It's going to You will not be able to use the cement which is in your bags for left unused for more than 30, 40 days. So there's a lot of impact on the material which was to be used immediately. So that materials had a lot of impact, and the lead time again, because of this pandemic, what was supposed to come in a week's time, it didn't come in a week's time. Even post the opening up, there was a lot of lead time issues in terms of availability of materials because your vendors, they had different problems, and it was not the same situation how it was before the lockdown was there. So there was a lot of lead time issues which we had to handle. Then let's say the material is available and there are people to work, but there was no material available at the site. Material is available to vendors, not at your site, because you don't order material in stock for more than what is required. So suddenly, when there is a lockdown, and you have laborers at your site who can work, but there is no material at the site to work. So this was another situation which we had to face. See, this depended from state to state. Certain states, construction was not allowed completely during the lockdown period, but in certain states, wise decision was taken because all the laborers are staying in the site itself. So what is the point? They are going to stay in their sheds, which is very cramped, rather than they can go out into the site and work in the site because they are all staying together. So as long as the food and medical facilities are taken care by the builder, certain states allow the construction of workers who were deployed at the sites. They did not move out of the sites; they were staying in the sites. So it was a wise decision which some states took. But again, you don't have materials to engage laborers because the next aspect of transportation was not there. Because of the lockdown, we were not able to mobilize material. Material movement was restricted. So, as again, with regard to material, there was a huge hit which the construction industry had to face during the lockdown period. Can you move to the next slide, please? The next, again, the impact on the machinery. What impact does the pandemic or the lockdown have on the machineries? See, certain industries are process-oriented industries, and the process have to continue. If there is any stoppage in the process, then there's going to be a lot of cost involved in recommissioning those process-oriented industries. Government allowed all the continuous process industries to perform, to continue their operations. But as long as it's a government-run organization, they'll be able to manage. But imagine a small private sector organization where it's a process-oriented industry, and they don't have an end user. They have to continuously produce, but there's nobody to take. So what will happen? They will not be able to sustain for long. So some of the continuous process industries also had to be stopped in between because there were no takers for the products. So that hit the machinery in terms of recommissioning. It involved a cost to recommission those machines, which are continuous process machines, which has to run continuously 24/7. So there was a hit in terms of the machines, continuous process industry, small timers. And in terms of the maintenance cost, whether you run your plant or not, there is a maintenance cost that's involved, which has to be taken care of. If you run your machines, then you earn out of it, and the maintenance cost is sustained out of the earnings that you do. But if you don't run your machines and you still have to maintain your machines, that's going to add up onto your cost. These costs are not planned when you start a project or when you do anything. So these are all additional costs which will have to be borne by the developer, whoever is developing the project, if it is not being factored into. What about the idling cost? Again, the cost of your machines, same thing. Whatever happens to maintenance when your machines are idle is going to be the same thing. All the machines that you buy are not going to be self-funded machines. Some are going to go to the banks, take a loan, and then buy your machines. And these machines are kept idle for 3-4 months, and the bank is not going to say, okay, 3-4 months you did not produce, so no problem, don't pay interest for it. You will have to pay interest. The maximum the banks can do is give you a moratorium where you uh, delay your interest payments, but it's going to double. If you don't pay now, you're going to pay more later. So that's again going to complicate things further. So that was the impact on the machinery part of the construction industry. Can you go to the next slide? What was the impact on the money aspects? This is uh, containing to an organization, I would say. The cash flows were constrained to a great extent during this pandemic time. What was the reason for this? Is because whatever your money that has to come, for example, say we had sold a lot of apartments and a lot of money has to come in. But suddenly, because there is a stop and there's a lockdown, banks would not fund you any further. Banks would want to check whether you are stable after 3 months of your operation, whether you will be able to sustain and complete your projects. They will not be funding you because they've already approved your loan. See, they will want to see whether the person who has taken the loan will be capable of repaying it. Earlier, he had job, he had security, everything was there, so he was able to repay. But today, will that person be able to repay or not is a question which the banks have to decide before further lending. So the lending of money to the individual buyers got delayed, and subsequently the promoters like us, for whom the money has to come from the buyer, got delayed. So that was a cycle where we had to manage the cash flows. We will have to be very careful in operating our cash. We can't be as lethargic as we used to be earlier, where every month you had some inflow. But this period of pandemic, it was not like that. There was only outflows and there was no inflows at all. So you will have to manage your cash flows accordingly. Apart, when you don't have cash flow, what do? You immediately go to the bank to borrow. So all your papers are good, everything is good. When you approach your bank and say, I want some money to complete my project, then again, there are not much of banks which are willing and forthcoming to fund you. So there was drying of debt in the market where everybody became cautious because nobody knew how it's going to turn out, whether the pandemic was going to end in 2 months, 3 months, or it's going to take time. See, we all thought the pandemic was over last year, and we all happily back to work. Can you continue?
Yes, sir.
We all thought that the pandemic was behind us, and we came forward and we thought that everything was fine. But suddenly, now again this year, we are hit with the second wave. So nobody knew at that time how the industry is going to operate. So everybody was cautious, and particularly the real estate industry, the banks were a little bit more stringent on us. They were looking every nook and corner to see that everything was, because these are all high investment projects. So they were very careful in terms of lending money. So the debt was not coming forward. So you don't have your own cash flows which is supposed to come to you, and the banks are not willing to fund you as they used to do earlier. Again, the government was unable to bail us out because there was no. The government was already reeling under a lot of financial stress, and they could not do much in terms of any exemptions in terms of GST or things like that, because that's the income that they have. So government was also caught unaware, or they were in a situation where they couldn't help the industry. Because of whatever reasons I said earlier, there were huge cost overruns because you have to take care of your laborers, you have to take care of your employees, you have to take care of your machineries, everything. So, in a span of about, say, though the lockdown was there for 3 months, for about 6, 7 months, clear there was nothing moving, and the people were not coming to visit the sites for new bookings to happen. People were scared if the virus is gone or not, so they were not willing to come even and have a look at the apartments. So one side there's completely inflow locked, and the other side expenses keep going on. So there were huge cost overruns in the projects which were going on during last year. So naturally, what happens is a lot of people who got stuck and they were not able to continue operations, and they had to default on the loans that they bought. They were not able to pay their EMIs on time to the bank, and the default started happening. So this, because of the pandemic, we had the impact was such that these were all the problems related to money, the next benefits. Whatever I discussed so far is nothing, but the impact on the mind was the biggest of the lot. There was huge fear among every sector. Take it the business owner or the contractor or the vendor or the laborer or the employee. Everybody were in fear. They didn't know what is going to happen. The virus will be brought under control. Are they going to have an impact directly because if they will get affected because of the virus? Nobody knew what. There was a huge sense of fear going on among the minds of the people. And there was huge insecurity in terms of the job and family. The laborers didn't know how long will the employers support you without a work. So that was the insecurity in the mind of the people and their family. Most of them are from different states, and they're worried about their family thousands of miles away. Are they safe in their hometowns, or what will happen to me if suppose something happens to me? What will happen to my immediate family who are with me, my wife, kids? What will happen to them? So there was a huge insecurity in the minds of the laborers and the employees. So that was a very crucial factor, and there was a lot of restlessness in the minds of people because of this aspect that there was no certainty. It was completely uncertain what the tomorrow is going to be. There was a lot of negativity that was going on. That there's not going to be life is not going to be the same again. So we will have to move back to our villages, kind of thing. And a lot of people started moving to their villages. Some tried whatever means possible. Some even walked a few hundred kilometers or 1,000 kilometers. So there's a lot of negativity around. So I would say the impact on the mind was much higher than all the four impacts that we discussed earlier. So this was something which had to be attended to. Next slide, please. What was the effect of all these impacts was that the project started to become unsustainable. The costs kept on increasing on one side, whereas there is no inflow at all. So the projects were not sustainable. Something had to be done. You have to do something to ensure that these projects are back on track. Some people tried something who were able to manage. Some tried suspending the projects. What do you do if you don't have money on hand? Try to suspend the project. Don't continue with your project till you ensure that your resources are back on track. You go borrow money from somewhere, do something, and put your projects back. So some of the builders tried suspending the project. Some of the projects, the builders were not able to do anything. They could not suspend, so they had to terminate the project. By termination, I mean that they handed over their project to somebody bigger who will be able to operate, or their termination. The people who were doing the project, they terminated. Some people they consolidated among themselves. Two, three small builders came together and they tried to somehow complete the project and do things like that. So this was the effect of the impact. So there are unsustainability, there are suspensions and terminations, but a few of them they sustained the onslaught of the virus. And what did they do is what I'd like to talk next. Next slide, please. The sustenance, yeah, the previous one, the previous one, yeah. The people who sustained, I would say, are the ones who played with their mind. Leave the other four factors. Whoever was able to sustain and go ahead with their business in this pandemic, they did, and they did well because they were able to take control over their mind. Most important thing is if you can keep your labors, uh, without their fear. So if you can tell them that I will take care of your food and shelter, I will take care of your medical expenses. As far as the labor is concerned, these two things were major for him: his food, his shelter, and if something happens, his medical attention. So if you address that fear in the mind of a labor, the laborers or whoever it is, the contractors or your vendors or your employees for that matter, as long as this fear factor was removed and their uncertainty about their jobs, and there to take care of your job. After this pandemic is over, we are going to again go back to the old time, and we are going to do business as it used to be. So whichever organization was able to give this comfort to the mind of the people who they were involved with, those organizations sustained this pandemic. They were not hit badly. It was a short break for them, maybe say 3 or 4 months of break, and they again jumped back and they were on to their course. So what did they do? Next slide, please. As I said, these are the factors which made them sustain in their business. That is, they were able to give security or certainty to the people who were involved with them. It could be at any level. It could be at the lowest level of a laborer to a mid level of a vendor or a contractor, or to the management itself, to the management of the company, the managers and the general managers and the vice presidents, whoever they were operating with. If the management was able to give in or pump in the confidence into the people, then they were able to sustain and they were able to continue with their business further. One of the key aspects what has to be looked into is cost control and financial stability. So, because whenever you start a project, everything is freezed. You know what is your bottom line. You know what is the cost at which you have bought the land. What is the cost that is involved for your construction. What is going to be a selling price, and what is your profit is all determined well ahead before you start a project. So, but suddenly when you have to face a situation where nothing was planned, there are a lot of expenses going on, it directly eats into your profits. So sometimes it could even pull you down into a loss-making project. So what are the ways where you can control is the cost control. Going forward after the pandemic, more focus on given by the construction industry into this aspect of cost control and financial stability. How do you control your cost? The earlier cost was monitored once in 3 months, once in 6 months, depending on the size of the organization. But one of those days where you can sit leisurely and finally after the project is completed, you can take the financials and see how much of profit you have made. If you are going to do business that way, where you look into your bottom line at the end of the project, today it will not work out. You are going to make up and end up in a big loss. Today, cost control is the key, and you will have to control cost at every stage. What do I mean by cost control? Cost control starts from avoiding wastages, small wastages at the site. Suppose you need 100 bags of cement to do your work today. So that 100 bags must be planned yesterday. You need to know which are the areas where you are going to deploy your material today. So that has to be planned well in advance. And if you take 100 bags, you're going to use the 100 bags and then leave the site because it's 5 o'clock in the evening and you'll have to clock out is not going to work out these days. You take a work, you finish the work, it's 5 o'clock or 6 o'clock or 7 o'clock, you finish the work and then leave, or you plan accordingly. If you can't do that, then plan in such a way that don't take 100 bags, take 90 bags, whatever is required, and work, because these material, what is left after the work is completed, is going to go waste, because you're going to, if it's a small site and you're going to use hand machines or for making concrete or things like that, you mix and keep the material and you go off without finishing the work, then that material goes waste. So these sort of small waste have to be controlled at the site level, and monitoring has to happen in terms of, because these small savings at every level is going to finally help you reduce your final cost. So wastages, how do we do that? Then again, you put your labors and incentivize your labors. That's one of the ways of reducing your cost. See, for example, when we start a project, there is a, I'm not sure if it's too long. Should I go short?
Sir, please go ahead. I'm enjoying it. I think this is, I can absolutely relate to the industry.
Okay, fine. I hope the students also feel the same. So, in terms of the incentivizing of the labors, it has to be done in such a way that, for example, the cost of a project is going to be 2,000 rupees a square feet. Construction cost is what we are looking at. If a labor is able to save 50 rupees or 100 rupees, then that 100 rupees what we save, we say 25% will go to the labor who has taken that project. So that is a huge kickback for the laborers. So they will ensure that the project cost is brought down somehow, so that they get an incentive more than the cost that we have agreed to be paid to the labor. So there are a lot of ways like this what we do in the construction industry to ensure that the cost of the construction is brought down. There has to be financial stability in the organization that's taking up the projects. So only when there is a cost control, there will be a financial stability within the organization. The next biggest factor that contributed to the sustenance of the people who were able to overcome the pandemic was remote working. See, because earlier we were able to go everywhere, wherever we want. Now there are a lot of restrictions in terms of movements, in terms of people gathering at a place and things like that. So the construction industry is moving to the next level, where there has been a lot of working remote happening these days. A lot of people have started working from home. Whenever it's necessary, only they will have to come to the offices. So back-end operations have started working from home. So the whole industry itself, there's a shift. Even you take the services sector, huge companies like TCS, Wipro, all the people, they've started working from home. So going forward, there will be a lot of change in terms of how you even design your home. You need to have a separate room for your online sessions, where that room will be dedicated for you and your kid. You'll have to plan something exclusively, kind of thing. So the industry itself is changing a lot. And of course, there is a lot of government support during the period to sustain the industry, like allowing the industry to work where the laborers were already stationed at the site. So these kind of supports were also given. The government was taking care of the medical issues if at all anything happens at the site. So the government was forthcoming and they were able to help us in terms of giving relief to the laborers who were stationed at the site. Next slide, please. As I said, the sustenance. I think I've discussed this in detail. This is only in terms of security of job and life. It was the builder had to take care of the financial support of the laborers, the food and shelter, the medical support. SMS is actually sanitize, mask, and social distancing. So these three had to be definitely taken care of within the site. And if there are any issues, the curing part of it was on the heads of the developers. We had to take care of the laborers who were deployed by us. Next slide, please. Cost control, again, how do you control your cost? You axe your overheads. Overheads are one of the major killing factors in any industry. So what are your overheads? How do you, what are the items which can be avoided in terms of, so you have a lavish office and try to reduce the office space, something like that. You will have to reduce your overhead, which is a recurring cost. Every month on month, you will have to spend it whether you have your business or not. So those are called as the overheads, and you try to axe or cut those overheads in order to save cost. So cost control is that eliminate wastage. I've spoke to you about how do you eliminate your wastage, and time is money here. So if you can do a project in 1 year rather than doing it in 18 months, that itself will give you a profit of more than 10-15% in your project. So all efforts must be done in terms of ensuring that the project is completed on time. If a project can be completed on time, that project has never failed in terms of monetary aspects. Any project that is completed on time has always succeeded in terms of the financial aspects. Educate and incentivize. There is a lot of effort that we have to take in terms of educating the laborers in terms of social distancing, masking, sanitizing. All those things have to be done to sustain the business. Then again, innovate. New ways of working have to be found. See, earlier days, for example, there was a quality control check. So there was a quality engineer who used to go to the site and then he used to take all the issues of the site, then bring it to the office, discuss. All those issues were there. The small thing with the latest mobile phones and other things. The job of a quality control engineer now is just to walk into the site. He will not talk to anybody. Just click pictures wherever there is an error seen. He will just post it onto the ERP. So unless the error is rectified, the contractor will not get his payment. So it is known that he has to correct that and he has to take a picture and post it back. So unless that correction happens, the contractor will not get his payment. He knows that nobody can overrule this. Once there is a defect noticed and that is posted in the site, then that has to be rectified. If there is any issue, then the site engineer is responsible. So some small innovations like this where you can control cost, because once or twice he will make a mistake. Third time he knows that he has to correct it for him to get his payment, so he will not make the same mistake again. So that's how small improvements can be brought at the site in order to control your cost. If you can do it right first time, that's the huge cost saving that you get instead of doing it multiple times. So always look at doing right the first time. So these are certain things which we had to enforce in order to ensure that the cost is controlled. Next slide, please. We have to change the method of working. Like I said, the monitoring had to be remote, the reporting had to be remote, and we had to aid on the technology, mostly the mobile and the WhatsApp groups and the ERPs. So these helped us a lot in terms of. These are all shifts that has happened post the pandemic, where we were operating differently before the pandemic and after. I would not say the pandemic is over yet, but still after the first wave, I would call. First wave was a huge learning for us, a lot to learn. And this is how we have changed our way of operating. Next slide, please. From the government side, again, there was support. The Tamil Nadu government were gracious to ensure that after some point of time they were able to supply some provisions to the laborers who were stationed at the site. They allowed in situ construction. I mean, in situ means the construction where laborers were already available at the site and medical support was there. And in terms of the central government, in licensing with the RBA, they were able to give us some moratoriums. So all these were the government supports which we had during the period of pandemic to help us tide over the crisis. Next slide, please. What were the lessons that we learned? This is the key, I would say. What lessons we learned because of the pandemic? See, we understand the next 2 years are not going to be easy for us. See, because we have already been hit by the second wave and we are not fully out of the second wave yet. Uh, Vaccination is going to take some time. I think the government has an ambitious target of 2021, but I have my own doubts if we'll be able to vaccinate at least 70-80% of our population by the end of this year. So the faster we vaccinate, the better it is for our industry. But as such, in our industry, what efforts we are taking is that we will ensure that all our laborers are vaccinated. If we have to pay that money, we will have to pay that money and ensure that the laborers who are working with us or the employers who are with us, they will have to be vaccinated first, and we will have to take care of them. If every industry comes forward and takes care of their own employees and their own laborers, then it's much easier to do it that way. So the next 2 years, we will have to wait and watch. I think that the next 3 or 4 months will be very crucial if we can control this wave and we are able to stop the next wave. We will bump into very well next year. So this time is really difficult for us again because we are under lockdown now and we expect the lockdown to be eased from the next week. So life is not going to be the same. We will have to come up with new developments, with new thoughts, new ideas. How do we run our business? One thing is sure that change is inevitable. Whatever ways we have been doing our business till now will not help us do the business the same going forward. So you will have to adapt yourself to whatever change is required. If you adapt yourself, you will be in the bus. If you are not, then you will be dropped, and the people who are willing to change will be moving the bus. So the management has to be sensitive and flexible during these tough times because everybody is going through their own share of pain. So you can't say you can't be very rigid in terms of handling people at this point of time. That's one of the important factors that you have to be sensitive and flexible. Saying that, the management also has to be stubborn. What it's a contradiction. One I'm saying be sensitive and flexible, and immediately I'm saying be stubborn. The stubborn is for the cost aspects of your project. You will have to be stubborn in terms of cost cutting or cost reduction, whatever you call it. In terms of innovation, in terms of new developments, you will have to be very, very stubborn and ruthless when it comes to continuing with your project. If you are not, then it's very, very difficult times ahead. You will have to ensure that your cost is well under control. And as I said, innovate, innovate, innovate. That is the only way to sustain or come out of the difficulties that we have. Find new ways of how to run the industry and how to do business. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. I would roughly put it in two ways. The construction industry post-pandemic. One is the consolidation phase, and the other one is the growth phase. Consolidation phase is what we are going through now, where we are trying to consolidate whatever is possible, how to come out of the situation, what are the lessons that we learned. So we are right now in this phase. Once we understand and come out with solutions for the impact that we have had in the last 1.5 years, then we will be able to move into the growth phase. And the growth phase is not far. I expect the growth phase to be coming up soon, maybe maximum in another 3-4 months. I think we should be back on track. Next slide, please. What is the impact? Because today the audience is mostly students. I just wanted to have one or two slides on the students. What has been the impact on the students? It's again uncertainty. Last year, you don't know whether you will have your people who are in their 12th standard or who are doing their final year of their engineering. They are not sure if they will have even their final exams, or are they going to have their final exams. What is going to be, because the classes have been held online. So how many students have the facility to have a proper Wi-Fi connection or an internet connection in order to attend to their classes? There were a lot of question marks and there was a lot of uncertainty in the air in the past 1 year. And in terms of employability, there were a lot of companies that were coming to the campuses to recruit people, but suddenly that has drained up the few companies that is coming up for campus recruitments last year. And that would be the situation this year too because of the second wave. So, what is the position of employability of the students who have finished their final years? Their family situations. Few people were desperate that after they finish their engineering, they've been doing pretty well in their studies, but suddenly they find they are in a situation where everything looks very bleak. There is a lot of fear and stress in the minds of the students because of this pandemic. This has been the impact on the minds of the students as such. How do we overcome that? Next slide, please. These would be my suggestions for the students who are in your final year of engineering. Brush your basics. See, no company that recruits you will will ask, come and interview you and tell you write a 10-page thesis or detailed answer. That's not going to happen. Anybody who's going to come and recruit you is going to recruit you for your strength in your basics. So basics, I mean, these are very basics. When we interview people, we ask them the difference between an OPC cement and a PPC cement. That's the first year of civil engineering. I would say 80% of the people don't know what is the difference between an OPC cement and a PPC cement. What is the compressive strength? These are basic questions which a civil engineering student is supposed to know even if you wake him up at 12 o'clock in the midnight and ask him. But I would say 80% of the people don't know the answer for very, very simple, basic questions. So if you're going to attend an interview or anything, brush your basics. Nobody is going to ask you to solve a problem which is fully theoretical in any interview. That will happen if you're going to do research and development where people are going to recruit you to do research work. But in terms of working at sites where construction is happening, these kind of questions will not be there. So there's nothing to worry. Be positive. Whatever has happened is not in our hands. We can't do anything about the pandemic right now. But be positive. It's always there is a job out there, and we are a growing economy. We will definitely beat this virus. If not now, immediately, maybe 3 months down the line, 4 months down the line, things will ease out and things are going to be much easier for you. But don't lose your heart or don't fear or don't be stressed. Be positive. There is always a way to come up. The best of the engineers who might have not been tutored in academics. So don't worry if you're not done well in your subjects or studies. It's basically how you cope up once you are given an opportunity. So look for opportunities. If opportunities are coming your way, don't neglect them or don't ignore them. Even a small opportunity, try to grab. And I would say the best thing to do is once you are given with an opportunity, learn. There should be a craving for you to learn. Okay, that's how you learn the industry. For example, I am an electrical engineer and I don't have when I joined this industry, I don't know what a blue metal is. That's how I joined this industry. But today I can say I've done 7 million square feet of construction. So it is only how and how much you want to learn. If you are willing to learn, then there's no end to what you can achieve with your skills. So whatever you've done so far, just put it at your back. And there's a lot you can do if you are willing to learn. If provided with an opportunity, always try to learn what you can learn from. Just observe people doing work. There's lots and lots of things to learn. If you can just, all that you need to do is observe. If you can observe, be it paperwork or be it work at site, whatever, you'll be able to learn a lot. And the final thing is attitude is everything. If you have the right attitude, I think all the four things that I said above is easily possible. So have a positive attitude, have a positive approach towards life. Nothing is going to happen. We have come across the pandemic, great hardships I agree, but going forward, we will be able to, because we've seen two waves now, and we are able to control both the waves. So I don't think things will be. We have seen the worst, is what I would like to tell you. So going forward is all going to be good and happy. So be positive, look for opportunities, learn wherever you can learn, have the right attitude. I think you will be able to come out in flying colors. Next slide. Next slide, please. That's it. Maybe I'm open for questions if there's anything. Otherwise, thanks a lot for your patient listening. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir. This, I guess, summarized everything from how it happened, how the pandemic started, and how it is after the second wave. I think you represented this very beautifully and very patiently to all of us. And with this only, my last question was answered partially, but still I want to know, so that the students can get to understand that what is it that right now, because very patiently you explained us that we have to crave to learn, be positive, and look for opportunities. But then again, sir, is there anything that any technology or anything that students can learn and which would help them in 2025, because the maximum students would be passing out this year or maybe within 2 years? So what is it expected to be happening into 2025?
2025 is still a long way. It's 4 years ahead. So I don't know what technology. Every year, technology keeps changing. So I don't know what would be the technology in 2025. But right now, immediately, I would say, as far as civil engineering is concerned, in terms of technology, if people are willing to get into projects, then project management is one thing which that's not a rocket science. It's easy to learn. So there are a lot of softwares doing how to schedule a project in MS software. A lot of softwares do that. Maybe if you're looking at project management as your area of work, then that technology would help you. It would be better if you learn that technology. And there's a lot of scope in terms of the quantity surveying areas where you estimate the projects. So that's one skill set that you can tune into, where you understand and learn how to estimate the projects. So, but being students at this stage, I would say do your subjects well. Go through your subjects and brush your basics. Brush your basics will be the key. You will have to be good at your basics. So that is there. The rest of the things can be trained. Once they come into the industry, they will automatically learn a lot of other things. So technology-wise, there's not much, I would say, there at this stage for them to do. But they can understand, they can look at what are the recent technologies that's available in terms of concreting and things like that. This I'm talking in terms of the interview point of view. They will have to learn these details.
Okay, so the project management is one of the things students can look up to and learn. And so, is there anything that you're expecting out of 2025, that okay, the pandemic would be completely over? I hope so. We all hope that the pandemic would be completely over by 2025. So, would the industry make another shift, or something would boom up, or something would go anything?
Definitely, yeah, definitely
2025,
the industry will be much, much bigger and much, much better than what it is in the
right
past
now.
3 or 4 years, because we've not grown at the pace at which we have to grow in the past 2, 3 years. So whatever growth was, it's like a spring. It has been compressed and kept. Now it has to bounce back. So there's going to be a lot of developments that's going to come in the next 3 or 4 years. So, of course, there will be a lot of construction work that's happening, infrastructure work that's happening, because that's the area where a lot of money can be spent by the government. And government is also looking at pushing the income for the people. So, infrastructure push will be a lot from the government's point of view. And affordable housing is one thing that's catching up very, very fast. The government is looking at a house for every person in the country, every family in the country, kind of stuff. So there's huge target set up for affordable housing, and there's a lot of incentives that's being given by the government for affordable segment. So the next 4 or 5 years, affordable segment should be doing huge numbers compared to the other segments. So that is one area. And in terms of technology wise, next 4 or 5 years, we'll be looking at how to reduce the construction projects. If we are able to complete a project in 1 year now, 5 years down the line, I think we should be able to do it in 9 months or 10 months time, or even in a lesser duration of time. So we will have to keep ourselves open. One thing that is prohibiting us from doing that is in terms of the cost aspects, because if we have to do reduce the project cycle, then the volumes have to be huge. If we are going to do some different kind of structural works and things like that. So if you have good volumes, then that is also possible. Because in other countries, if they can do a slab in 3 days, 4 days, or 5 days, we are not able to do it because of cost constraints and other reasons. So there are a lot of things like that which will ease up maybe 5 years down the line. So we will have to just wait and watch how our industry is moving. If it is all as promised, then we will also be doing very, very well in terms of technology and in terms of the industry as such.
So thank you so much, sir. Like I think you have explained us everything so beautifully and so elaborated that all the questions, all the queries must have been answered, and all the doubts which would have been there in these students who are right now into their engineering, that what is happening and what things are leading to. I think you have summed up to a very, very good slides and to a very good presentation. And I must really thank you on students' behalf and on Recorem behalf to be present with us today and give your valuable time to us. Thank you so much, sir. Thank you so much. And thank you so much, students, for being live with us and watching us. Stay tuned for more updates. Thank you, sir. And here we can end up the
Thank
show.
you. Thank you.
Thank
Thank you so much for having me. Thank you.